Good morning. It's a pleasure to be back, and it's Erev Pesach, which is Passover, Easter, and Ramadan. To everyone, I say have a sweet, healthy holiday, and for those fasting, may it be an easy fast. But what a glorious day it is in New York City. Yesterday I was outside in 81-degree weather, walking through Central Park, reading in Central Park. It was a joy. And I have been celebrating since I know that I'm cancer-free. And not long here yet, but hey, you can see it's coming back. I don't know how long I'll let it grow, but this is me. Since it's era of the holidays, I thought I'd talk about subjects that are near and dear to my heart. The great redistribution of wealth from 1914 to 1980. It's a remarkable book in A Brief History of Equality by Thomas Piketty. Not his usual 1,000-word tome like Capital in the 21st Century. However, this is packed full of information. I thought for a change, I'd make something a little personal for you. I lived through the Great Redistribution, and so did my dad. My grandparents came here from Russia and the Ukraine around 1905, the Great Migration from Eastern Europe. They didn't want to be in the pogroms, so America was the land of choice. My dad fought in World War II. He was young. He had me, and he was drafted right after Pearl Harbor. When he came back from war, because he was in the European campaign under Patton, in my family, even though there was an Education Bill of Rights and a GI Bill of Rights, my grandmother thought, you're home 2 weeks, you're malingering. If you're malingering, you got a family, you got to go out and work. The only thing my dad knew at the time was floor scraping. So he went out and he scraped floors 7 days a week. I know, because as a little kid, I used to volunteer to come with him while he looked at the floors that had been scraped. And little by little, he built up his business until he was the biggest union shop on Long Island, Ace Hardwood Flooring Company, Inc. Every wave of immigrants came through Papa's shop. Right after World War II, there were the Norwegians, the Latvians, the Estonians. Hard workers, all of them. They'd stay for almost 8-10 years, and then they'd go back to their countries. And then there were Jamaicans and the Italians. And they stayed, made enough money, went back, and did whatever else they were going to do. And then the other waves, the African Americans, the Polish, the American Irish, you name it, they were all in that shop. 1986, he gave up the union, and soon after, I took over the business. Let me go backwards in time. Dad started from very little. The houses that he scraped and finished and laid the floors in with his men, none of them could have lived in that housing. This was government housing, Levitt homes, 18,000 homes, and it discriminated against Jews, African Americans, and anyone who didn't look homogeneously like the original American immigrants. So even though there was equality and there was money, and eventually my dad was able to live in an upper middle class neighborhood in Lawrence, Long Island, with people who had hundreds of millions of dollars in the 70s, Papa was equal alongside them. Didn't have their background, didn't have their training, certainly didn't have their education. He went to night school to complete high school. And I only knew years later that he wanted to be an attorney. All his life, he wanted to be an attorney. And I also didn't know that he had a love of history. And that's why he collected stamps and coins from other countries. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. That was what life was like during the Great Redistribution. But we forget what came before the Great Redistribution of wealth. Before that, there was never equality. It was only inequality. When slaves were freed, they didn't get the reparations. No siree. The landowners got the reparations. In fact, in Haiti, when the slaves were free, which were 90% of the population of Haiti, the government of Haiti had to pay reparations back to the landowners, back to France through the 1950s. You want to know who guaranteed those payments in the early part of the century? The United States guaranteed that Haiti would pay reparations to landowners in France through the 1950s. So the concept of reparations is old, but the concept of giving reparations to those who were affected by slavery, that's a new concept. That's the same concept as paying people a decent wage for a decent day's work. No siree. The elites that have been there from the 1400s and before, up through 1914, they usually were 10% of the population. There was a bell curve. As I'm talking to you now, there is no bell curve in America. About 70% of the people don't make enough money to survive, and the rest are the upper classes. They've taken up the slack that used to be the bell curve. But when the Great Redistribution of wealth occurred, we all made money. Not only did we make money, but we made industry run smoother. And we had shareholder and stakeholders involved in the corporation. I know, as a young woman in my 30s, after being in scientific graduate schools, I worked for Ford Motor Company. I was in charge of what they called blue sky programs, where if you developed a device that helped Ford make cars better, you got a $10,000 grant, a bonus grant. I developed 2 instruments for them in the paint department. I got $20,000 in bonuses. The same thing happened when I went to Pfizer. The people, the labor was cherished. Everyone cared about labor. They too had $1 million improvement fund. If you came up with a good idea, that Pfizer could implement, you got a grant. I know because I was responsible for handing out the money. Not only that, as part of a cherished labor workforce, I was able to solve problems instantly for Pfizer. We had integrity in those days. When my streptomycin line went down because there was contamination on the line, and this is a clean room, probably a P4 facility at Pfizer, in order to make streptomycin. I remember gowning up, putting on the face masks and the goggles. I don't think I had an exterior air supply, so it might have been only a P3 facility. However, it was a clean room. You could not step in there without going through door locks and without being clean and cleaning yourself off before you went into the system. So as I said, we noticed contamination. And as I had learned at Ford Motor Company, when you're on an assembly line, you see one defect, you got to stop the line immediately, or you're going to have a lot of them. So as soon as I saw the defect and it was brought to my attention, we stopped the line. We notified the FDA that we had a problem and what batch was contaminated. We got all of the hourly and management people together in one room, and we sat down, and all of us, there must have been 25 of us, brainstormed where could the problem have arisen. And we figured it out. It was in an air duct that was contaminated. Within 12 hours, we had sterilized the room and we were back in operation. Management gave me the power as a manager to stop the line. To stop the line and do the troubleshooting that was necessary to make the product appropriately and safe for consumers. In those days, we really cared. Did I make a big salary? Well, you decide. It was 1979. I think I made about $55,000 at Pfizer a year. Was that a lot? I don't know. I know I used to travel to and from Pfizer from my home in Lawrence, park in a secure lot, and walk directly into the plant. They were not safe days in Brooklyn then, but it was safe within Pfizer. All of us worked together. All of us cared about each other. And all of us were passionately about putting out the best product we possibly could. And we had fun, and we were rewarded, and we were paid well. Pfizer was never unionized. It didn't have to be, because the Pfizer management made sure everyone got union wages and benefits. So that's my story of what happens with the great redistribution when there is equality after so many years, centuries of inequality. What we're doing is the great experiment. It doesn't end when people decide they'd like a second Gilded Age. No, sirree. It just means we have to be aware that the great redistribution to labor is a new idea in the centuries-old feudal system, but it's an idea whose time must come and must stay. So with that, hey, slaves went out of Egypt. They can come out of the rest of the world as well. And labor, I believe, is going to be ascendant. God's blessing. Happy holidays to everyone, no matter what it is you celebrate. Celebrate life. That's what I'm doing. And if you can, and if you're lucky, celebrate family as well. God's blessings to all of you, and thank you for listening. Have a lovely day.